Hello everyone, in this video we're going to talk about how we can complete some ratio tables. So let's talk about ratios first. It says that two ratios that describe the same relationship are called equivalent ratios. The values of equivalent ratios are equivalent, and we can find and organize equivalent ratios into a ratio table by doing one of the two following operations. We can either add or subtract quantities in equivalent ratios, or we can multiply or divide each quantity in a ratio by the same number. The one that I typically like to do is this second bullet point here, multiplying or dividing each quantity in a ratio by the same number. I just see that as a little bit easier, but there is always a case in point for each of those different scenarios. So there could be one that's a little bit more efficient than the other, but sometimes it's just personal preference and I prefer to multiply or divide. So let's fill out the two examples that we have here. So the first thing I'm going to do for number one, I noticed that I go from 4 to 16, so that would be multiplying by 4. So when I go from 5/2 to my next term, I also want to multiply by 4. So if we do 5 over 2, that's 2.5, and if we multiply that by 4, we get 10. So we know we would put 10 right here. Okay, now I notice that I go from 10 to 5, so that would be like dividing by 2. So now when I go from 16 to my other number over here, I want to divide by 2, and 16 divided by 2 would be 8. Now we notice from 5 to 15, we are multiplying by 3. So from 8 to my last missing number, we want to multiply by 3, and 8 times 3 would be 24. So that's how we can complete the ratio table for number one. All right, number two, we have 0.4, 1.2, 1.6, and then we have some values on the bottom as well. So I want to figure out what am I multiplying by to go from 0.4 to 1.2. Well, if we can't see it, we can divide backwards. So let's do 1.2 divided by 4, and we get 3. So we see that we are multiplying by 3 to increase our ratio here. So now in the bottom, we want to also multiply by 3. So 0.75 times 3, and that gives me 2.25. Now I want to see what I'm multiplying by to go from 1.6 to 1.2 to 1.6. So we can divide backwards to figure out what we multiply by. So we could do 1.6 divided by 1.2, and that gives me 1.3 repeating, which would be like 4/3. Okay, so I'm going to multiply by 4 over 3. So let's multiply by 2.25, and we get 3 right here. Okay, now I notice that in my the lower row of my table, we're going from 3 to 18, which would be like multiplying by 6. So we can do 1.6 times 6, and we get a value of 9.6 for our last missing box. Okay, so that's how we can complete some ratio tables.